Okay. The final presentation of the day. Let me go ahead and bump this up to start it. And this is what I do every day with my customer, because I work for them for 5 hours a day is the requirement. And so the first thing I do is I do a kind of like a health check within their remedy system. And in the health check itself, it's more along the lines of, because it is a SaaS environment, I don't know what happened during the middle of the night by BMC, because they've kind of changed their process of letting us know when they're doing upgrades. So now they don't tell us anymore. They tell us after they've done it in production, where they first usually give us at the end of the month, they'll tell us what they're going to do next month in dev, QA, and prod. Now I have to monitor it to see if there's anything that's done each day, to see if there's any surprises. They'll send us an email that they've updated something in prod only after the fact that they've done it. So we're trying to get that changed in that aspect. So just to give you an insight into what's involved, my job with this company is to look at their dev, QA, and prod. We convinced BMC to let me have admin rights into the production environment because I knew what I was doing, and to function on that capability. I deal with putting in incidences into the system because that's all they use, and my boss does it as well. If he wants something done or wants me to check something, he'll put in an incident, and that's when I get notified that he wants me to verify whatever. Now he does it on the back end because he and I are the only ones that really go into the ITSM side, as well as Smart IT, as well as SRM, as well as whatever else that we need to go into, like the gateway server and so forth. We do have one other person. He handles all the gateway server connections for us, but he's just really just there on the side. Plus, we talk about NFL fantasy football. So I manage all the customizations, configurations. I put them in dev. I test them out. I document it, put it in QA. I write a test script. I don't know how many of you do that, but I have to write a test script to give it to the customer to walk through it before I can move it to production. So when you do a test script, I build it step by step because they don't know all the steps they have to do to even verify, because they go in themselves to look to see if the email went out or whatever. I can't even send an email into their system because my email address is partneritSM.com. It's not their domain. So they block anybody from submitting anything there. So I have to ping them when it's an email issue or email functionality so I can troubleshoot. It takes a little longer in that aspect, but we make it work. And then my last session I presented, I do the same thing. I document everything that I do. So I want to get your attention on this because the environments never remain the same. You never know what's happening. I'm always looking at the log files to see if something magically happened, and I try to find out what it is. I guess I'm the worst nightmare for BMC support because I send in tickets when I see an entry that shouldn't be there. And they're like, well, you can ignore it. It's like, that's not going to sit with me. I want to know what it's doing, what it's going to do, or, oh, it's not going to do anything. Well, how do I know that? It's new to me. You may have seen it. So where's your documentation? So they'll send me knowledge articles, or they'll say, well, we'll get to the engineer. So sometimes it stretches to a couple of weeks before they come back and finally tell me that how to fix it, or just to ignore it because it's not going to break anything in that aspect. So I know that my system's not always going to be stable. I know there are forms that are going to have over 1 million records in there from the workflow that we do and stuff like that. So I have to get involved in that aspect. I will say that in my past, I've always preached this when I started with Remedy Corporation, continued on with Peregrine Systems, and then into BMC, and then went on my own for RMI Solutions, is that I know that the environment is always going to change. Something's always going to happen to it, one form or another. If they added 100 tickets today, that's a change in my environment because now I have 100 more tickets that are in the system that'll remain open for another 2 or 3 years because they always put things in pending and never close. So one of the things I do as a service is generally to let you know is to do a health and welfare check of the environment. So every morning on production, I run through a checklist. every Friday, I run through QA and dev, because they're making changes to those. So at least I get flagged if there's anything wrong with those, because I got to make sure they're not. So one of the things is, like I said, is I have a ticket system. And this is my ticket system down here that basically pulls in the LDAP data. With any integration in SaaS, unless they change it with 2103.01 or 2103, in our 2008, our LDAP integration has to run through Gateway Server. Our Dev Studio has to run through Gateway Server. Any integration that you do has to run through the Gateway Server. That's our connection to the Windows of BMC's environment. Okay. Any questions on that? So when we run our LDAP, we run it, our integration to the LDAP system of my customer through the gateway using the Atrium Integrator functionality. It runs twice a day. It runs at 9:30 and it runs at in the morning and 9:30 at night. And as you can see on my flags, you can see the red markings. The red markings are generally one of two things. Number one, the network crashed somewhere on my end or their end, or the other problem is that there's some kind of errors within the CTM people form integration. If there's a people error, I've set up a notification to send it to my boss so he can handle it, because he's got to deal with it, because I can't get into LDAP. So he has to go in and fix it. And usually the problem is the site. They leave it blank in LDAP. They send it into our system and it flags it as an error because there's no site. So he fixes it in LDAP. He runs it again on the next time it runs through and it fixes the issue. Okay, so I don't have to deal with it. What I have to deal with is if it fails on the load step, it's probably a connection between us and BMC on their end or our end. I just have to restart the quickie service. Once I start it, I manually run it to see it and verify it. Once I see the load is green, then I now know that that issue is resolved. Now, by my fault, I don't put in a ticket every time I reboot this quickie service. Should I? Yes, because it is an environmental change, because it's an issue, and I should report it. I did it on a couple of times, but then my boss said, you don't need to do it as long as you do it real quick, because it takes a matter of 10 seconds to launch it in that aspect. Other things about this is, I don't know if you have, some people keep these entries for their Atrium Integrator jobs over and over and over. You can set it up on your profile if you create these jobs to remove them after a certain number of days. So with this, I don't create this. This is done by an integration profile. So I set the integration profile to remove these after 7 days. So the default? It's 30 days, I think it's the default. I think it's 30 days, and we set it to 7 because it was too many that was in it. So, or you just leave them in there. You don't have to worry about it. That's what I've seen. The next thing I go into is the AR System Server Group dashboard. I look at the various things in here because this also helps me troubleshoot certain things, like the application pending form. I look at the pending email message form that tells me if there's any errors or anything that's been there for too long. I don't care about the too long one, the bottom right-hand corner, because if I get rid of it in the top right-hand corner, it gets rid of it in the bottom. I look at any CI events, and my biggest CAI event that comes in, we now require every ticket to have a template. If they go into SRM and type in the category, application, case description, it doesn't trigger the action to pull in the template. So when they submit it, it errors out. Okay. So because of that, or in Smart IT, they try to do it. Well, it doesn't hit this because I don't see that functionality. They get the error. They have to fix it right there. So I don't have that on the Smart IT side. It's more on the SRM side. And then the sys action functionality, I haven't had any problems with that yet, but it's another form that you want to take a look at to see what could happen in that aspect. So one of the things in SaaS that I started looking at is the application pending. It started doing all of these sync report or smart reporting user sync entries. What happened is it was off of an escalation that was running every 12 hours. And I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was our escalation that was syncing our users from our LDAP data load with the smart reporting. And they were like, why am I getting all these the records in here? And it would stay, and they would stay there for hours and start cleaning up. So what they told me is that they have this since 2002, they have this new feature for SaaS that runs a synchronization automatically so I could disable the escalation. So now I disable it. Now I still see this. I see it when I know the LDAP is running, but it's real quick. It's not that escalation process. So it doesn't run through the escalation thread.
And that's on-prem too.
Yeah, is it on-prem now? Okay. So it's basically one of those that I knew I needed to get rid of, and they told me to just disable the escalation, and now I don't have that headache anymore for the most part. This is what really gets me is we do use SLM. We do not use the approval server, but we were getting SLM and approval entries into the system, log entries into that application pending form, and BMC standard response, ignore it. And I didn't really want to ignore it because I hate things in the log files. I like to have a clean log. So they did come up and tell me all these little things that you could suspend the collector. They don't have collector anymore. It used to be one of those things that you can pull in data to troubleshoot on SLM to say, hey, is it a connected or not connected? And then you could report a ticket to say it's down. They got rid of that connection functionality, but they didn't get it out of the system. So it still records in the application pending. So if you want to get rid of those, this is how you can remove that from your environment. Just set it to where it's true to suspend it on both cases. And I actually got rid of it, but now it's back again. I don't know why it's back. So it lasted for a little bit. One of the issues I get in the pending email, a lot of the issues I should say, for the first part, the most part is I get emails that fail to send out because the email address doesn't exist. We have a login for Watchtower, which they run an API program to put in tickets and update tickets because they hate to go into Remedy and do it themselves. And I've seen how they do it. They run it through our custom form, which then processes it in Remedy. And so they have a Watchtower profile that they run through it. And I'm like, well, can I change your email address to something else, like a valid email, so I would get rid of these email errors? They said, no, we don't want to see them. We don't want to send them out. The problem was they were flagging it for every time they pended a ticket, they would put Watchtower as the assignee because they didn't want to get the message from SLM that they're almost out of time or whatever. So when they found out we stopped the emails, they decided to stop that. So I don't have to worry about these errors anymore because they didn't know for a year we'd stopped the email notification from SLM a long time ago. So now they don't have to put that in that process to receive any emails until we started up again. But I do get some from BMC because BMC will log into our system and they will do some test runs and so forth. And I'll see this in here coming from the smart user, which is their login. So smart user, their email address is smart user. It's not a valid email. So I tend to get rid of them, but they will get rid of out of the system after, I think it's 30 days or 7 days out of the box. But I don't like to see them in there anyway. So it gives me something to do by deleting. The CAI event, I always do a run check through here to see if there's any errors. And like I said, most of the errors are that you must have a template. And this morning I had one notification on SRM to say that somebody forgot to add a template. So I canceled it in SRM and I got a nasty email from the customer that submitted it saying, I put this ticket in, you need to fix it. I turned around and said, your ticket didn't get processed, so I canceled it. You need to resubmit it, but you need to do this to make the template happen. And he goes, oh, okay, thanks. So, because he didn't select it, he typed it in. I knew exactly what he did. So he typed it in instead of selecting. So in that case, that's generally how I go through it. So also I look at the different log files. I have a hard time looking at the standard filter SQL log in SAS because BMC runs in the admin side. I can get it on platform 0 and platform 1, but I can't get them in admin. I don't have permission. When I say, hey, I want to see this file, it says you do not have permissions. And I ask, can I get permissions? Well, just tell us what you want. We'll give it to you. I don't want them to email it to me. I want to be able to grab it myself. So I can't look at our standard log files. Okay. I can't look at those active links and filter logs. I have to do it through my personal profile. So what I do here is I do look at the AR error, the AR debug, and the AR monitor to look to see if there's anything or any issues that are occurring. So one of the things in the AR error log that I found out on this one was that escalation issue with the smart reporting sync user. And I'm like, well, it's an escalation user. It tells me it's an escalation, but what's running every 12 hours? So guess what? It didn't tell me what escalation. So I had to look at all the escalations and I only found one that ran every 12 hours. And it was the synchronization of the user profile. So that's how I troubleshot that functionality. So again, you're going to get all these issues that appear. This one was kind of an oddball functionality, which I didn't know this. How many of you use the incident duplicate of or original of relationship? You use it at all? If I call you up and say, hey, I got a problem, somebody else calls you up and say, I got the same problem, do you duplicate those? Do you relate them? Do you duplicate them? Do you say one's original and the other one's a duplicate?
Over the years, when I've tried to use that, it hasn't worked well. So I'm kind of giving up on it. I don't know if it works well now, but I've had more problems with it than it ever just doing what it should.
Well, I haven't had a problem in the old days where you could do it, but when the parent released it, it automatically released the children as resolved, and so you can separate that. Well, in this environment, 2008, they wanted me to see this because they wanted to start using it. So when I turned it on and tested it out, it's like, well, it's not releasing the children. I couldn't figure it out. It's not releasing the children. So then when I came back into my QA and started looking at this, all these logs started coming into the error log. And I'm like, why is this happening? So then I started looking at the tickets. It was the same two records I played around with. Okay. The issue is when you use original of or duplicate of, it takes the child and marks it as pending and pending the original ticket. If you do not put an assignee into the ticket of the children, when you resolve the parent, it will then mark the children to be released. Here comes the escalation. That's the error you're going to get because it cannot move it from pending to resolve because it does not have an assignee. So it errors it out because of an assignee. So I told him, if you want to use this, you have to mark it as the assignee. So now the question is, do I put the person that's working on the parent as the assignee of all the children tickets? Or do I leave it as the technician that was initially assigned to it, let them respond to the customer because it's their ticket? Because if you're dealing with different locations and the issue can be the same, I don't talk to your customer, you talk to your customer. So it's really a situation that you have to think about. So now it's in their ballpark to say if they want to use it, they just have to make sure the assignee is going to get filled in. Guess what? They're not changing their process. They'll leave the ticket as assigned, and then they will move it to resolve and put their assignee name there when they do it. They won't put it in as in progress or anything like that with the assignee on it. They'll close the ticket automatically. So it's going to be a continuous issue. If they want to use it, they're just going to have to change their process. So again, looking at the log files. The AR debug, the problem I ran into this was a configuration setting. The size of the log file was too small for me to view it. Every time I clicked on it to open it up, it wouldn't let me do it. And it wasn't set to 0. It was set to, by default, something like 110.4.85760. So when this log is full, it won't let you open it up if it's more than that. So I kept on getting an error. Invalid file, invalid file. I'm like, what the heck? So then I found this, I expanded it to 0. They said, no, you can't do that. Don't set it to 0. Why? Because it's going to be on performance. So then I set it to 134.217728. Don't ask me what that number was, but that's the same number that they had on one of the other configuration settings. And it works, and it still works. And sometimes when they reboot the server, it does give me a new file, and sometimes it doesn't. But with all these errors that were coming up, oh, this was massive. I mean, with those people records that I had to clean up, that would eat up this file, and that's when I couldn't see. So now I don't have that problem anymore. I could probably go back to the default, but that's the first thing I ran into was I couldn't even open up the file. But when I do look at it now, when I look at the AR debug, this is where I saw that BMC.asset.sandbox with the 3,400 some odd profiles that were invalid, and I needed to clean them up. So when I cleaned them up, I was now able to look at the log file without having to reset the size of the designator. I also looked in here where on SRM, it was requiring category field 1 to be filled in. I'm like, what in the heck is category field 1? Guess what category field 1 is? It's an assignee. It wasn't assigning it to a person. So I had to turn on that SRM ticket assignment rotation, you know, where it says the individual assignment process, put it in row level by, was it by last assigned or number or capacity? Well, in this case, I had to turn it on, and now I get assigned as well as my boss does because we're the only ones in the group. And that fixed that issue. And then the common errors, of course, is the site. And this one, the error was that the people were in the system, the site was in the system, but somebody went in and disabled the site. So then I had to turn on the site, rerun it, and then revalidate the integration, and it worked. This one's kind of hard to see, but this is the latest error that I got out of AR debug by BMC updating the Kubernetes with their last update that they had to do. When they updated it in dev, I got all these errors. In QA, I got all these errors. In prod, I got all these errors. I went back and asked them, why are these occurring? They said, we did a change in Kubernetes that they told us to put in. We did it, and it's not compatible to RMI. They said, don't worry about it. It's the third party. They would have to fix it. We can't fix it on our own. So they said, just ignore it. Well, it's kind of scary when you look at it, when it says that you need to, and this is the scary part. You can't read it back there for the most part. And I'm coming up here to the board, and it says illegal access. Flagged an illegal access from Kubernetes that was trying to get into the system. And it still happens now when they restart our servers on all three. So it is a Kubernetes update that they performed back in November. I don't know if anybody else is having it, but we're having it.
I've been seeing it on almost all my units lately, and maybe that's because I'm thinking of the JPK, so it might be a Java thing. So I see it on prep too.
Well, I know that the update that they said was to the Kubernetes. This is what we're going to do. They even told us that they're scheduled to do it, and as soon as they did it, and we rebooted it, that's when it happened. So it could be the JDK that's tied to the update or whatever. But they said it was a third-party issue that for me to ignore it. So now every time they run it, I'm starting to get my log files longer again because I can't do it to get rid of it. I'd like to get rid of it, but they said we will try to get rid of it if you want us to, but it's a third-party issue. So I just wanted to point these things out that you have to watch, because I told you your environment's going to change on you whether you want it to change or not. You just got to be aware of it. Okay. This one right here is checking on the production environment for RBE. This is where we, instead of me checking it on a regular basis, it now has an email notification that I set up to send to the manager. And he basically gets a notification that there is a failure on an RBE process, rule-based email. What this is where they email to send in something. In this case right here, we have, look at the subject. It's kind of hard to read it. It's a little crunched up, but it starts with RBE dash and then telecom. This is a standard they have to put in because this is going to grab in one of our RBE rules, the template, to assign it to the telecom team through an email ticket generator. Well, if they don't follow the 25 character string that we have, it's going to fail. If they don't follow the spelling of it correctly, it's going to fail. So because if they fail on this, it will create a default ticket in that aspect. So that's where the default, so they have to run that standard. And I told them it's not going to run unless you actually create that functionality. So that wasn't an error or anything like that. The errors we get are this other one that they use, which is called for user. If they put for user : and a space, it fails. So all he has to do in this case is remove the space, and the steps down here in the bottom left. All they have to do is go in and make the change, go to the status, change it to action found, go to the Z1D, which is down at the bottom under the system field, and click, the developer field, and click on the Z1D action and type in evaluate. Save it, and it will rerun the RBE process. So I don't have to have the customer resubmit the email in that aspect. So if you're going to create tickets through RBE, this will help you as far as if it's the rule not found or if it's an error. If you can fix the error inside this record, then this is how you can run it without it. But on the other one that we had, we couldn't figure out how to fix it. So we just went ahead and canceled it and started the process all over. This one was a scary one for me. UDM job log. UDM is that data management tool that's using the Atrium integrator to bring in data. And when I looked at the log file, did a search of greater than 0, I got all of these SCCM and NC_NTS asset CI load entries. And I'm like, in my production, what the heck is this? Immediately put in a BMC ticket. A couple of weeks later, they finally started getting rid of it. What happened was somebody on their end pointed somebody else's environment to our production server by mistake. And it failed. It never put any data in, but it tried to connect because the connector wouldn't let it in. But we got logs to say somebody's trying to tap into our production.
That's literally scary.
It was scary.
Yes.
So,
someone else makes you touch your server enough to give it a log file.
oh,
Through.
my customer was not happy.
Yeah.
He goes, if it wasn't for me checking all these logs and everything else and getting on BMC to make sure that they're watching what they're doing. I mean, this is the only the critical one I've run into with BMC doing that kind of stuff. But I have to monitor it because it's two people that are involved. It's BMC and it's my customer that's involved in it. And I got to look at both ends to see who's going to break what, because both sides will break it. So it's not just BMC. I also have to look at my customer when they do stuff. Yeah, it's like, well, the network on our side kind of glitched yesterday. I guess I should have told you, right? Yeah, you should have, because then our last night's job would have rained. And then the report that falls into the report that goes out to my boss every morning, because now he gets all the records instead of just the one that didn't change. Which is another thing about this too. Just recently, we had a lot of profiles that didn't get updated since the 24th of November, and it came in the report. And he was telling me the report was wrong. And I'm like, well, I looked at it. It's like, yeah, we got more than 57 records. We have over almost 3,000. And so then I started looking at the last modified date. It was all the same date. So something happened on the LDAP side. And then they were saying, oh, yeah, their profiles changed. Somebody made all these changes. So now I'm looking at the daily report, and the numbers are going down by 100 profiles each day. So they're taking a while to adjust all these profiles. So that's not an issue from the SaaS process. It's a issue from the customer side. So when I deal with non-support personnel, in this case coming through SRM, which I'm trying to get them to look at another area to try something different instead of just with SRM, because SRM may have an end of life somewhere along the line. The non-support people don't know DWP at all. And you can spell it out to them. You can put it on a silver platter, and guess what? They'll still find a way to screw it up. Okay, and I'm going to show you. So in DWP, the user only deals with service requests. They only look at their tickets. They do not look at the back end. They don't know anything about the incident side of the house. Okay. So in this environment, they used to through the old system. The customer used to be able to see the incident ticket data, and they lost that when they switched over to DWP. So in this case, they weren't aware of what's going on. So what they would do is they create a ticket and say, what happened to my ticket? What's the status of my ticket? So now I have another incident ticket. So then I came up with the bright idea of having another service down here at the bottom, general service, and say search incident ticket. You want to know what the incident is? Type in your REQ number, hit enter, and it will bring the data for you. Okay.
Are they authenticated?
What's that?
The people that are filling this stuff out?
Yeah, they're authenticated with the CTN people when they come in. They have to have a profile.
Any records based on their ID?
They can look up their REQ number by the global search that they can do, or they can look it up on the My Activity. They have other search. But again, these are non-support people that have not been trained on this, so they don't know anything about My Activity. They don't look at the My Activity. They don't click on it. They always see catalog, and they don't see anything like that. They'll open up a report an incident, and they won't know what template to grab. So guess what? Oh, well, I'm in Remedy. I'll send it to Remedy team. So this is the non-support people, and this is what they do. And I'm like, why am I starting somebody's computer, or why am I trying to update somebody's profile with this salary? I'm seeing all this data because they don't know what template it is. So in this case here, we came up with let's search an incident. Well, I would thought that was the right thing to do, but by putting in this functionality, they were supposed to type in the number, and what the number would do would tell us. They would type in REQ with the 60143. They'd hit enter, and would give them the incident information. Guess what? That's not the number they would always put in. They would put in the incident number, hit enter, and nothing would show up, and they'd submit the ticket. So now we're trying to find out, well, what are they looking for? So now, why are they looking at typing in the incident when they didn't get the incident? Somebody sent an email to them with the incident number. So now I also had to create one for incident or for request. So they type in the incident number, they get the request detail that's tied to it, so they know what the request is. Again, I'm working with non-support people. So you're trying to spoon feed them when you can't really train them on anything in that aspect. Then when I'm dealing with customizations, I did this in the last session I did. So I'm not, for those of you that were in here for the customization process, it's really about what their customer's asking and following up and so forth. So in this case here, I go to my ticket console and I look at all the tickets. One of the things that my customer wanted, he wanted to change the size of the priority in the TLA site field. He wanted it shrunk smaller. It's set to 30 pixels. Out of the box in the coding of DWP or of Smart IT. I have no access to them. So I had to go out to BMC. Peter Adams said, you're right. It is not a parameter setting that I can change. He says it's hard coded into the code and you cannot modify it. So they had to put some kind of restriction. So the minimum size is 30 pixels. So my customer's stuck. He cannot reduce it, even though we don't use all of the data. So that's where I have to put in a ticket and then explain to him why he cannot change it. So again, in my documentation class session, I always said document. And I do my documentation in a test document so I can process the whole thing, record everything that I'm doing. And then once I'm done in production, I'll move it to my final build process and give them all the build functionality, all the step-by-steps of what I had to do to make this happen, like adding the template field to Smart IT incident view. Okay, because they want to see what the template that they selected, which I don't know why BMC didn't add that in there. Because if you select the template in the creating of a ticket in Smart IT, you do not see the template they selected in the actual record in Smart IT. Did you know that? Because it wasn't there. So I had to add that in. And in Smart IT, it's a different template field than it is if you were in the ITSM side. So you have two different template name fields that you have to deal with. They still use the same template IP field, they just use a different template name field. Okay, so this is where I had to set 5 people form fields to audit tracking. So I gave them how to do all that. And the verification process, I gave them step by step. And I also gave them a spreadsheet as well, because they like the spreadsheet. So this is just going through the documentation. So my day as a administrator / developer, I monitor the system and I also monitor the tickets. And then I turn around and I have to do consultant work. So is there anything that you do on a daily basis that I didn't present up here? Is there any other forms that you would look at to troubleshoot anything on a daily basis? Do you ever look at the AR cart log? Do you know how you can get to the AR cart log through an AR system form? There is a DMT form that if you open it up, it's the troubleshooting form. You can get the AR error log as well as the AR cart log. I don't care about the AR error log. I get that from the console that I showed you for the server group. But that form gives me the AR cart log. I don't want to log into the gateway server to get the cart log, AR cart log, so I just go to that form, open it up, and I can see. Gives me the latest happenings on the integration if I need to troubleshoot something. So that's kind of the things. I find more things and stuff like that. So I did put it in a spreadsheet to give it to my boss, so if I'm not there, he can run through steps for checking and stuff like that. Any questions on anything? Yes, no? Oh, all right. Thank you for your time. You get 45 minutes before.
I'll ask this, what's a cart log? I'm so out of the loop.
It's the log file for the Atrium integrator when you're integrating data from LDAP, or you're integrating data using the data management tool, or any integration piece that you want to pull in data from an external. The cart log tells you how that integration will work.
What is carts usually? Usually you can figure something out by the name, like AR error.
Well, it's all part of the Tahoe stuff. So they got kettle and spoon.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
they just kind of went crazy with their name.
Okay.
It's a third-party
Yeah.
product that I don't know. I just we just always look at the air cart log.
there's kettle and spoon, and then there's pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's pot and pan, and cart is probably, the thing that you transport all of your pots and pans.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.